Goose Pond Out, stage 13, 4.6 miles. Oh, and sorry about the lack of ambient noise and the rest of the stuff this morning. We forgot to turn on our ambient noise mic. Armed. So this is a 150, left 3 Titans, 200. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Left 3 Titans, 200. We have a caution jump 30, then a right 6 plus over big jump 30. The caution's for the first jump. Right 6 plus over double jumps. Go, go, go. Left 6 plus over small crest, 70, jump 50. Caution right 6 over jump into left 5 plus short into loose starts. Right 4 over small crest. Left 3 over small crest. Right 4 over crest. Left 5 short into right 4 plus. No cut. 50. Left 5 minus loose ends. Right 4 minus opens over small crest. Into right 5 short over crest. Into left 4 plus over crest opens 70. Left 3 late, no cut. Right 4 over small jump, no cut into left 4 plus. Double caution, big jump into left 5 plus. Repeat, double caution, big jump into left 5 plus. 30. Caution, right 5 minus over kick into big jump. 30. Right 3. Here's a kick. Oh, here's your kick. Right 3. Left 3 plus. Stay out, opens over small crest loose, into right 6 plus over small crest, left 4 plus over small crest, into right 4, no cut over small crest, opens over small crest. There we go. 50, slow over jump, left 6 plus, right 5 minus
Hold
over...
on, I think you're ahead of me.
Okay. Okay, there's your slow over jump, left 6 plus, right 5 minus. Over small crest. Okay, Kings 180, keep going. Right 6 plus, big cut. Left 6 over small crest, 100. Bridge, 70. Right 6 plus. Over crest, 50. Left 6 plus into caution brake. Right 6 over kick. Into left 4 plus short over small crest. Into right 3 minus. No cut. Into left 4. Over crest, opens, over crest, long, tightens 5 minus. 70. Right 6, left 6 over small crest, extra long, into flat jump, 50. Right 5, 50. Caution jump, 40. There's your caution jump, 40. Right 3 plus over small crest. Into left 3 plus over small crest. Into right 4 opens, 100. Left 3 plus, long, 30. Right 3, 120.
Right 3?
Right 3, 120. Left 3, 70, crest 120. Left 6, long, into small crest 50, small crest 50, right 4 plus long, left 4 minus, 50, right 6 over crest, 70, crest 50, left 5 plus 50, right 4 minus, into left 4 plus, no cut, left 6 plus, right 5 minus, into stay left over jump 50, right 5 plus over small crest, into left 5 minus over small jump, right 6 over kick, no cut, into left 5 plus, no cut short, 50, stay left over flat small jump 70, left 5 plus over small crest, long, into right 4 plus over crest, 50, right 6, into left 4 plus, opens over, opens long, repeat, left 4 plus, opens long, into stay right over crest, 120. Stay right over jump 100, right 4 plus, into left 6 plus.
Right 4.
Right 4 plus. Into left 6 plus, 100, right 4 over small jump over finish 30, crest, into left 6 short. Okay, you're done. Holy crap, that was Pete Asher.
Good job.
You too. Ow.
Sorry.
Oh,
What,
fuck.
did you hit that?
Yeah, I hit
You
that.
need to keep your hand over
I
there.
know. Hey. Thank you. Okay, that's good. Mike, could you